So unless you've been living somewhat under a rock, you've probably heard what one of these things is. It's called Tymewear. What does it do? It is a breathing sensor. So you put it on like a heart rate monitor, measures your breath rate, and measures your ventilation as well. So the question is, why did I buy one? They're not cheap, and you might think you can do lactate testing. Why would you actually buy one? Now, I think there's a couple reasons why I bought one. Number one, got to be ahead of the science. Always got to think if Visma and people are using it, you got to see maybe it's worth it. So that's like kind of a small, not great point. Second point is I do think it is pretty useful for measuring internal load in comparison to heart rate. Looking at what Stephen Seiler was saying about breathing rate and some others, I think it is maybe a useful way of looking at internal load. Obviously, heart rate is very variable, but it's also not perfect. We'll get onto that in a minute. Third one is actually being able to tell what your VT1, VT2, and VO2 max are from just breathing rate. Now that's obviously pretty useful if you don't have access to either lactate testing or a lab. So first of all, we'll go on to kind of like using it just as an internal load monitor. So what do I actually mean by that? What I mean is you have your power meter. That's your external load. So if you're doing 200 watts, you're doing 200 watts. Then the only way most people measure like what the body's doing is on heart rate. Now that is pretty good. Heart rate is like a good way of telling you how hard the body's working in general. And obviously along with like perceived exertion, they're pretty decent. Now, where does maybe heart rate come down? Well, heart rate is pretty variable on a lot of things, especially like eating, caffeine, etc. Breathing rate obviously is as well. It's not independent of that. But one of the reasons I thought it would be useful is if you look at like VO2 max intervals or threshold intervals over time, often the heart rate actually plateaus, but it's way, way harder and your breathing rate can make you aware of this. Stephen Seiler has been going on about this for a while, and he's one of the people who's kind of behind this. He's been looking at it a lot. And if you look at some of the things he says it's a pretty useful way of being able to fine tune your VO2 max intervals better. You can really see when people are actually fatiguing in real time. So that obviously is useful. It's not the be all and end all. And again, a lot of it is going to be experimentation on longer rides. How does your breathing rate and ventilation rate change? That is like something that you do want to look at. And potentially make sure you're not riding too hard at the end. Maybe your heart rate might stay stable, but actually breathing rate goes up, and then you realize maybe you're above where you want to be. Now, the main reason I bought this actually was just to see if it can do metabolic, like as in VT1, VT2, VO2 max. So can it actually estimate your zones? Now, there's a pretty good paper written about it. It's not perfect, but it gets your VT1, VT2 heart rate more or less spot on when they compared it to an actual lab. So that was pretty good. Obviously, when you buy the Tymewear, it comes with an app. The app, you do a ramp test. It then tells you VO2 max, VT2, VT1. It then also says these are the normal percentages of all the different thresholds, and it goes your VT1 is really weak, or your VO2 max is really weak, or your VT2 is really weak, and then you can fine tune it. Now, I think that is really useful because without going to a lab, that's actually really hard to do. And you might go, okay, you can do a lactate testing, you can, but the VO2 max, okay, you can just do a 3-minute max test, which a lot of people do, and then that kind of gives you an indication, or a 5-minute test. But I think it's useful to actually have a way of looking at it objectively, and then you can actually target your training a bit more scientifically, and you can go, okay, my VO2 max is really high, but my threshold is really low, so I need to do threshold training, or my VO2 max is high, but actually my thresholds are a really high percentage, so I need to do that. And obviously LT1 is somewhat independent of that. But you always want to target it, but it might not be your biggest goal if it's actually quite a high percentage already of your threshold. Now, so that's all good, well and good. So we found out 2 use cases for it. Now the question is, obviously I've only had it for 3-4 days, maybe 5 days actually, and using it on a day-to-day basis. Now, luckily on Training Peaks, the beta graphs, they actually have Tymewear metrics on it. So that's pretty good. WKO also have Tymewear metrics now. So that is pretty good. The bad thing is you have to have a Garmin. The Wahoo doesn't work with it. So that's pretty negative if you're a Wahoo user. The Garmin does work. So that is the big thumbs up for the Garmin, to be honest. And you can actually have it on your head unit. You can see all the metrics. They're not that useful to track in real time. And yeah, I think the thing is, at the moment, like, I'm trying to look at it and see how it informs my training. At the moment, I don't think there's been anything that's like too different to heart rate. I also haven't used it for very long, and I think it would take time to kind of get used to it. I'd say the only thing that was very interesting is that I had a calf stop near the end of my ride, and then after that, the breathing rate stayed the same, but the ventilation, like the volume of like air, was way higher. Sorry, yeah. So that was interesting. Something's going on there. Again, it's like not like there's almost too much data at the moment, so it's going to take some time to get used to it. I think what will be useful is trying to do the ramp test on the app to see where my thresholds are. Obviously, I have lactate testing, as previously mentioned. I've done that a lot, but it'll be interesting to see that. And also, if you don't have access to it, it'll be good. It'll be a good way of doing it. So I think, is it cheaper than lactate testing? Initially, no. It probably is more expensive than a lactate test, like the lactate meter plus the testers. But I think it's kind of better because it actually gives you it forever, and you don't have to pay per strip. And obviously you then actually are doing it in the ride. So if you know that, like, your LT1 ventilation is like 100 or something, then you'd go, okay, well, if we go over that on a ride, we probably need to calm down a bit. Similar to obviously your lactate heart rate as well, like, sorry, your VT1 heart rate or LT1 heart rate, like that is kind of similar. I think that'll be interesting. I also just think it'll be interesting to see across a threshold session how it goes up and down, and maybe you'll be able to pinpoint your threshold a bit better during the season, during a session. It might make it more accessible to, instead of actually having to bring a lactate meter with you and then guess how much carbs you have and all the rest of it. So I think it's definitely potential for it. I wouldn't say it's a no-brainer at the moment because it is pretty expensive. But yeah, I'm going to be using it basically in all my training rides. And yeah, we'll see how it goes, see what I make of it. Probably do another video on it in a couple months and let you know if I actually think it's worth it or if it's just kind of pointless and you should just, hack with heart rate and power. But anyway, cheers for watching. Hope you did enjoy this video, and I'll see you in the next one.